Every time we go to the pet store to buy food for our dog Mora, I'm reminded of something that should make every marketer pause. Just within the one brand we buy, there are options for puppies, adult dogs, senior dogs, big dogs, small dogs, dogs that need weight control, that's our dog, dogs that need digestive support. Then there's a choice of protein, chicken, beef, salmon, bison, and whether you want wet food or dry food. On the brand's website, they proudly say they offer more than 80 different formulas designed to support a dog's unique nutritional needs and taste preferences at every stage of life. 80. That's not confusion, that's clarity. That's a brand acknowledging something we all understand instinctively. One size does not fit all, and pretending it does would be irresponsible. And this kind of personalization isn't unusual. Think about your car, the models, the trims, the configurations. Think about shoes, styles, widths, sizes, colors, use cases. Even in highly regulated industries like pharmaceuticals or biologics, personalization exists because scientists and healthcare professionals understand that when you ignore differences, outcomes suffer. So there are different doses, there are different modes of delivery, and even different flavors. Most marketers get personalization. They're fluent in it. They optimize for it. They profit from it. But there's one moment where that fluency disappears. This isn't where brands lack sophistication. It's where sophistication suddenly disappears. Because when personalization intersects with identity, something changes. You can hear it when identity comes up, the hesitation, the second guessing of what to say and how to say it. It's not hostility, it's unfamiliarity. And the contrast is striking. People don't end up having a hard time talking about older, overweight, blind dogs with dietary needs. No one worries about saying the wrong thing. No one braces for correction. But when the conversation shifts to human identity, that ease disappears. Suddenly it's, let's just focus on the general market. We don't want to get political. Is this woke? Is this aligned with our values? Is this worth the effort? And that right there is the glitch in modern marketing. Not a lack of data, not a lack of tools, not a lack of best practices, but a selective refusal to apply what brands already know works to the place where consumers are making decisions more consciously than ever. And the cost of that unfamiliarity shows up in brands' bottom lines. Because when people don't feel seen or reflected in what matters to them, they don't push through, they move on. Today's customers aren't obligated to accept what's offered. They have options, they know they do, and they use them. So after this short break, we're going to get more into why identity and not focusing on it in your marketing, how that is impacting your sales and your growth. Now,
HubSpot helped Tumblr solve a really big problem. They needed to move fast to produce trending content, but their marketing team was stuck waiting on engineers to code every single email campaign. Now they use HubSpot's customer platform to email real-time trending content to millions of users in just seconds. The impact? 3 times more engagement and double the content creation. Want to move faster like Tumblr? Visit HubSpot.com.
You might be wondering, what does identity actually have to do with selling more cars or toys or SaaS products? It has a lot to do with it, not because consumers are trying to make a statement, but because identity shapes how people evaluate whether something will work for them. A while back on LinkedIn, I saw a hearing impaired woman share that she would have bought an Apple Watch years earlier had she known about the accessibility features already built into the product. The brand understood that identity mattered in product design, but that understanding never made it into product communication. The result? Delayed sales by several years. At a family reunion a couple of years ago, our group decided not to go to a restaurant that was highly rated and widely recommended. Why? They didn't have any gluten-free options on the menu. 2 people in our group, including me, needed that option. So we chose a place that worked for everyone. The result for that restaurant? Lost sales from a large group, including people squarely in the so-called general market. Another woman shared with me that she chose the company she uses to invest her retirement savings specifically because it was designed with women, their needs, their considerations, and their realities in mind. The result, a long-term customer relationship rooted in recognition. These decisions aren't rare. They're happening every day. They're quite common because whether they say it out loud or not, consumers are always trying to answer a fundamental question. Is this product for someone like me? Or said another way, have people like me found success with this product? And they're looking for signals quickly and clearly that give them the answer. And when that answer feels unclear, people don't always explain why. They don't always complain. They choose differently. And the data reflects this shift. In the 2025 State of Representation and Marketing Study, 37% of consumers said they do not engage with or buy from a brand if they don't see themselves represented. And 81% said that they do buy from a brand when they do see themselves represented. That's the cost of the glitch. Lost sales when consumers don't feel recognized, increased sales when they do. Not because identity is a trend, but because recognition is now a baseline expectation in a market defined by choice. So let's talk a little bit about the problem with quote unquote general market marketing. Now, the limitation of general market marketing isn't that it's wrong, it's that it's incomplete. It operates under the assumption that large groups of people experience the world and make decisions based on largely similar factors. But the world doesn't work that way. People move through the same environments differently. They face different constraints. They assess risk differently. They look for different signals before they decide. And when marketing ignores those differences, it creates friction. Not because people are difficult, but because the experience wasn't designed with them in mind. One woman shared with me that her Muslim faith shaped which events she could attend when she went to conferences for her business. Now, because of her faith, she did not attend events centered around alcohol or held in bar settings. So she expressed that she was missing out on opportunities to build relationships and close deals. The issue wasn't lack of ambition or lack of interest or lack of capability. It was that the default experience assumed a version of participation that didn't work for her. I saw the same pattern show up in research in a different way. One respondent described himself as a single older man, not married, no kids, he loves his pets, and has disposable income. And yet, this gentleman shared that he's rarely marketed to in a way that reflects his life or his priorities. Not because he's hard to reach, not because he lacks buying power, but because he doesn't fit the default assumptions baked into quote unquote general market thinking. That's what general market marketing does by design. It doesn't answer the someone like me question. Instead, it defines someone like me as average, typical, normal. But what is normal, really? Consider this. Data shows that Black women experience significantly higher maternal mortality rates than women of other races. Pregnancy and childbirth are often described as universal experiences, but the risks and the outcomes are not the same. So when a Black woman is choosing a doctor or deciding where to give birth, she may be evaluating an entirely different criteria, not because she's an exception, but because her lived reality requires it. A quote unquote general market approach doesn't account for that difference. And when those differences matter, as they often do, the experience fails for those consumers. Not necessarily in a way that makes the headlines or in a story that makes its way all the way up to the top positions at a company. Not with backlash, but with disengagement. This is the flaw in general market marketing that a lot of brands miss. When experiences are designed for an imagined average, anyone who doesn't see themselves in that average is left to do the work to try to fit in, to try to assimilate, or to try to just make it work for them or opt out. So after this short break, we're going to get into the reframe about how you should be thinking about marketing to today's consumers. Okay, I've got another podcast recommendation for you. It's Marketing Against the Grain, hosted by Kip Bodnar and Kieran Flanagan, and it's brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. If you want to know what's happening now in marketing, what's ahead, and how you can lead the way, this is the podcast for you. I've listened to this show several times, and I can tell you that I have sent episodes of this show to people in my network, and they may have gotten great value out of it because it was on topics that are super highly relevant today. If you want to check out a recent episode to pique your interest, check out My Data Proves SEO is Not Dead, plus how to rank #1 on Google and AI. It's a super practical show where you'll get lots of no fluff insights. So I definitely recommend checking it out. Listen to Marketing Against the Grain wherever you get your podcasts. So at this point, brands tend to fall into one of three places. Some already understand that identity shapes how people experience products, services, and brands, and they're actively building with that in mind. Others sense that something isn't working, but can't quite name what's broken. They feel the friction, but haven't yet connected it to identity. And some haven't engaged with this at all because when systems work by default, it's easy to mistake that experience for universality, but that misses the cost that assumption creates. But what matters, though, isn't where a brand starts. What matters is what it does next. Because in today's market, choosing not to account for identity isn't neutral. It's a decision with consequences. And that's where the opportunity sits. So here's a reframe for you. Identity is the completion of personalization. Personalization isn't a problem. It's just stopped short in a lot of instances for a lot of brands. Most brands already know how to tailor experiences by behavior, lifecycle stage, preferences, and intent. They've invested heavily in doing this well. But when identity entered the picture specifically for humans, that same rigor often disappeared. Not because identity isn't relevant, but because it was treated as something separate, something cultural, political, or optional, rather than foundational. And here's the part that often gets missed. Identity isn't the destination. Treating identity as a standalone initiative, something to acknowledge, reference, or represent, creates another kind of fragmentation. The work isn't addition, it's integration. Letting identity inform how personalization shows up across the system, from who is centered in research to how customers are defined, to what signals are prioritized, to how relevance is communicated. This isn't a departure from best practices, it's the completion of them. Because the question consumers are answering hasn't changed. They're still deciding whether it will work for someone like them. Identity simply makes that question visible. And brands that learn to design with that visibility don't just personalize better, they grow with more precision, relevance, and resilience. So at this point, the choice is simple, even if the work isn't. Brands can continue designing for an imagined average, or they can acknowledge what's already true. That identity shapes how people experience products, services, communications, experiences, and brands, and how they decide whether or not something is for them. Choosing the latter doesn't mean launching a campaign. It doesn't mean saying everything perfectly. And it doesn't mean turning identity into a moment. It means letting identity inform the places where strategy already lives. Who you define as your customer, what buyer personas reflect and what they leave out, what you measure and what you don't, how you conduct market research and build customer intimacy, what messages you're delivering and how they're landing, who shows up in your creative and ad representation, and how decisions get made across the marketing mix. In other words, it means treating identity not as an overlay, but as a design input. This isn't about adding complexity, it's about removing assumptions that no longer hold, because the market has already shifted. Consumers are already deciding through identity whether brands account for it or not. They're looking for signals that answer a fundamental question quickly and clearly. Will this work for someone like me? Brands that choose to see this clearly will build relevance that compounds. Brands that don't won't fail loudly. In a lot of instances, they'll just keep wondering why growth feels harder than it should. Because growth stalls when brands stop recognizing who they're building for. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. That's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed this show, I would so appreciate it if you would share it with your friend, colleague, and your network. And if you're curious about what may be stalling your growth, go ahead and take the What's Slowing Your Growth quiz. It's a quick 2 to 3 minute diagnostic that helps you identify where there might be areas that are holding your growth back and how to fix it. Go to frictionlessgrowthlab.com/quiz to get started. I'll also drop a link to that in the show notes for you below. Until next time, remember, growth accelerates when you remove friction for your customers and for your business. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you soon.